There is a quiet kind of power that moves mountains, not by thunder, but by patience, not by noise, but by knowing. And once you learn to hold your peace and pour that energy back into yourself, the world cannot help but shift in your favor. There is a silence that stings, and then there is a silence that sings. The world often mistakes them for the same thing. But those who have walked through storms without needing to shout about the rain know better. They understand that silence, true silence, is not born from weakness, it is born from wisdom. We have been taught that to be silent is to be submissive, that those who speak least are often those who lack the courage to speak up, but that is a misunderstanding born of noise. The kind of silence I speak of is not the silence of fear. It is the silence of knowing, the quiet that lives in the soul of someone who no longer needs to prove, to please, or to perform. It is the deliberate stillness of a person who has learned to protect their peace. You see, anyone can make noise. It is not hard to raise your voice, to throw your energy into the air and demand that others recognize you. But power, real power, doesn't clamor. It does not need to declare itself. It doesn't scream to be seen. It simply is. And in that isness, there is strength that does not rely on reaction. There is a kind of dignity in silence that the loudest person in the room will never understand. To be silent is not to disappear. It is to reappear in yourself. It is to gather your energy where it matters. While others chase claps and compliments, you chase clarity. While others drown in noise, you wade into still waters and find that you are not lost. You are free, you are focused, you are in control. Some will question your silence. They will try to interpret it, define it, dismantle it. They will call you cold, arrogant, distant. But what they do not know is that you have chosen silence not because you are empty, but because you are full of reflection, full of awareness, full of a kind of self-respect that no longer wishes to be wasted on battles not worth fighting. And yes, there will be times when silence is misunderstood as passivity. When you choose not to respond, not to explain, not to defend, some will call you weak. Let them, because you are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to understand yourself. And understanding oneself is the greatest kind of strategy. Silence becomes a sanctuary when the world gets loud. It becomes a mirror when people try to distort your reflection. In silence, you can hear your own voice more clearly than the opinions of others. You can sort through the chaos and locate your truth, the kind that isn't shaped by trends, gossip, or pressure. Silence teaches you timing. It teaches you when to speak, how to speak, and more importantly, if something even deserves a response. Some battles don't need your sword. Some insults don't deserve your name. And when you respond to everything, you dilute yourself. But when you choose your moments, you become unforgettable. Not because you always spoke, but because when you did, the earth paused. There is no weakness in saving your energy. There is no shame in letting others fill the room with chatter while you sit still, steady, grounded. That is not retreat, that is refinement. That is revolution in its most sacred form, the kind that does not beg to be televised. We live in a culture that glorifies the immediate, the loud, the constantly available. But not everything must be answered in real time. Growth, healing, transformation, they take time and they take place in the quiet. A seed does not shout when it is sprouting beneath the soil. The moon does not scream to outshine the sun. They simply become in their own time, in their own rhythm, with their own grace. So the next time someone tries to pull you into a storm that isn't yours, remember, your silence is not surrender. It is selection. It is strategy. You are not ignoring them. You are honoring you. Silence, when chosen, is a kind of brilliance. It sharpens your mind, softens your heart, and guards your energy. It tells the world, I am not here for your noise, I am here for my peace. And in a world that thrives on distraction, nothing is more powerful than focus. Nothing is more radical than restraint. And nothing is more graceful than knowing when to speak and when to simply, silently rise. There comes a moment when you look around and realize that giving all your time, all your energy, and all your love to everyone else has left you empty. Not because you are incapable of giving, but because you have forgotten that you too deserve to receive from yourself first. You were never meant to serve others from a cup that runs dry. You were meant to fill that cup with purpose, with peace, with passion. And then, if there is overflow, let it touch others. But the filling must come first. To focus on yourself is not to be selfish. It is to be sacred. It is to honor the vessel that carries your dreams, your pain, your power. It is to look in the mirror and say, I matter too. That is not arrogance. That is self-respect. And it is long overdue. Too often we are taught that to be good, we must give ourselves away. That love means sacrifice. That strength means holding everyone else up, even when we are sinking. But let me tell you, love, real love, includes you too. It includes your rest, your boundaries, your growth. And if it doesn't, it isn't love, it's performance. You do not owe your constant availability to a world that takes without asking. You do not need to explain why you're choosing to sit alone and read, why you're turning your phone off, why you're no longer answering calls that only bring confusion or chaos. That's not rudeness. That's wisdom, that's alignment, that's self-respect, wearing its most beautiful cloak, silence. When you begin to focus on yourself, the world may protest. It will ask why you've changed. It will wonder where your attention went. It will miss the version of you who always said yes, who showed up when it hurt, who never asked for much but gave so much. But you are not here to live as a memory of who others preferred you to be. You are here to live as the truth of who you are becoming. And truth, real truth, requires space. It needs time, it needs quiet, it needs care. When you decide to focus on yourself, you begin to realize that not every hand deserves your touch. Not every voice deserves your response. Not every invitation is an opportunity. Some are distractions dressed up in flattery. Some are detours trying to look like destiny. And when you respect yourself enough to say no, you start to see how peace returns like a long-lost friend. There is dignity in choosing yourself. There is healing in saying, I will no longer abandon myself to make others comfortable. Because each time you betray your own needs, your own instincts, your own well-being, you teach yourself that you are secondary, and you are not. You are the beginning of every story you will ever write. You are the root from which all your dreams must grow. And if you do not water that root, it will dry, no matter how many flowers you try to offer the world. People may compliment your petals, but you will know. You will feel the thirst beneath the beauty, and eventually it will show. So take time with yourself. Get quiet enough to hear your own voice beneath the noise of expectations. Get soft enough to hold your own hand. You do not need to rush into fixing others. You do not need to apologize for slowing down, for sleeping in, for starting over. This is your life, and you are allowed to live it at your own pace. Some will call you distant, let them. Some will say you've changed, thank them. Growth is not always loud, but it is always intentional. And when you begin to grow inward, the world outside you begins to reflect that strength. Your self-focus is not just an act of preservation, it is an act of revolution. In a world that wants you fragmented, distracted, and dependent on approval, choosing yourself is the loudest declaration of freedom you can make. You are saying, I am enough. I am worthy of my own love. I will no longer wait for someone else to see my light before I turn it on. Focus on yourself, not because others don't matter, but because you cannot pour clarity into someone else's cup while your own is full of confusion. You cannot give light while sitting in your own shadow. And when you do this, when you begin to treat yourself as someone worth showing up for, everything starts to shift. People respond to the energy you give yourself. The more you respect yourself, the less tolerance you'll have for disrespect. The more time you give yourself, the more time you'll have for things that truly matter. And in the end, you will discover that self-focus was never selfish. It was survival, it was salvation, it was sacred. Growth is a quiet thing. It does not announce itself with trumpets or demand applause as it enters the room. It does not seek permission. It simply begins, softly, invisibly, like a seed stirring beneath the soil, long before anyone can see the evidence of its becoming. We live in a world that celebrates the show, the performance, the grand reveal. But growth doesn't live there. It lives in the silence after heartbreak. It lives in the long nights when no one is watching and you are left alone with your questions, your tears, your fears, and your hope. It lives in the quiet moments when you choose not to react the way you used to, when you choose to pause, to reflect, to sit with your pain instead of running from it. That's where real change takes root, not in the spotlight, but in the shadows where character is shaped and courage is born. There is something sacred about the quiet that holds our growing. It is not a silence of emptiness, but of presence. The kind of presence that listens deeply, that allows space for transformation to rise up from within. When everything is loud, we move fast, we distract ourselves, we chase things, but when it gets quiet, truly quiet, we're forced to meet ourselves, and that is where the growing begins. You cannot force a seed to bloom by shouting at it. You cannot rush it by pulling on its leaves. The same is true for your healing, your purpose, your becoming. It needs stillness, it needs protection, it needs time, and it needs to be out of view from the noise of opinions, the weight of comparison, and the pressure to perform. So many people give up on their growth because they cannot see the immediate fruit. They want to skip the silence and go straight to the success. But fruit does not come before the root, and roots grow in darkness. They dig deep into what is unseen and uncomfortable. They go where others will not go, so that when the time comes to rise, they can hold you steady. If you do not allow yourself that time of quiet rooting, you will rise too fast, too fragile, and fall at the first gust of wind. We are not meant to grow all at once. We are meant to grow in seasons, and some seasons look like stillness, like isolation, like rest. But these are not dead places. These are sacred places. They are preparation. They are cleansing. They are the deep breath before the becoming. You may feel behind because your journey is quiet, because no one sees what you're doing, because the world isn't clapping yet. But do not be fooled by the silence. Some of the most powerful things in life grow without witness. A mountain does not need an audience to rise. A tree does not ask for praise to stretch toward the sky. They simply rise quietly, faithfully, day after day. And you are no different. There is a pressure today to constantly announce our progress, to prove we are growing by sharing every step of the process. But real growth does not need to be announced. It reveals itself when the time is right. And often, by the time the world notices, the roots have already been growing for years in the unseen spaces of your life. Let people wonder where you've gone. Let them question your quiet. You do not owe them proof of your process. You owe yourself the patience to evolve without performance. You do not need to be loud to be becoming. Some of your greatest becoming will happen in moments so still, so soft, that only your spirit will know they've taken place. Stay there, in the quiet, in the stretch, in the unglamorous work of healing, rebuilding, becoming. Let the noise pass. Let the world rush. You are not late. You are not missing anything. You are doing the most important work a soul can do. You are growing roots. And one day when the bloom arrives, it will not be because you forced it. It will be because you honored the quiet, trusted the process, and gave yourself the permission to grow in your own time. There is a hunger in this world, one that grows louder with each passing scroll and swipe. It is not the hunger of the body, but of the spirit, a need to be seen, to be validated, to be acknowledged in the eyes of others. And so many chase that feeling, not knowing it is a hunger that cannot be satisfied by the spotlight. Attention, like sugar, gives a rush, but leaves the soul starving. The desire to be noticed is not wrong. It is human. But when it becomes your sustenance, when it becomes your compass, you begin to lose yourself. You start crafting a version of you that's easier for others to digest. You dilute your truth to fit into frames and filters. You shrink or inflate to fit someone else's idea of who you should be. And in all that effort to be seen, you become invisible to yourself. Attention is a drug, and like any drug, it gives you a high that wears off quick. It feeds your insecurities while pretending to cure them. It builds a false sense of self, one that depends on likes, shares, applause. But the moment those stop, you begin to question your worth. You begin to ask, was I ever enough without the echo of the crowd? Sobriety from attention is not easy. It means withdrawing from the noise. It means sitting in the silence where your only mirror is the truth, not compliments, not comments, not the curated versions of life people present to the world. And in that silence, in that sobriety, you learn to face yourself. Not the self others applaud, not the self you dress up for attention, but the one who exists when the screens go dark and the room goes quiet. The hardest part about detaching from attention is the loneliness that follows, because for a while you may feel forgotten. The world doesn't reward quiet transformation. It rewards visibility. But visibility is not the same as value, and presence is not proven by presence online. Some of the most rooted, radiant people are the ones you never see because they've chosen a life of depth, not display. Sobriety teaches you that your worth is not a group project. It is not up for vote. It is not dependent on how many eyes are on you. You begin to realize that peace doesn't come from being recognized. It comes from being real. You find joy in the small, unseen victories. The day you kept a promise to yourself. The morning you woke up and didn't need a stranger's affirmation to feel whole. The night you chose sleep and solitude over one more post to remind the world you exist. In that space, you start to create differently. You begin to live not for applause, but from authenticity. You stop measuring the value of your words by their reaction and start valuing them by their alignment with your spirit. And when you speak, it carries weight, not because it's loud, but because it comes from a place that doesn't need permission. The world will tempt you back. It will offer you another taste, another chance to be seen, to be praised, but you will know. You will feel the shift in your body, the dissonance in your soul, because once you've tasted the truth of being enough without the noise, the crowd begins to feel like a cage. You will see people chasing attention and recognize the ache beneath their performance. You will hold compassion, not judgment, because you've been there. You've stood on that stage hoping the lights would warm you, only to find they leave shadows when they go out. You've known the silence that comes after the applause, and you've survived it. More than that, you've grown in it. And growth, real growth, doesn't crave the crowd. It craves connection, first with yourself, then with what is real, what is steady, what does not change when the followers fall or the trends shift. You will crave conversations that don't start with, look at me, but with, let me know you. You will crave a life that feels full without needing to be watched. The drug of attention tells you that more eyes mean more value, but the truth is, The most meaningful things you'll ever do may never be seen. And that's okay, because when you choose sobriety from attention, you don't lose your glow. You simply stop needing someone else to flip the switch. Boundaries do not always arrive with loud declarations. Sometimes they come softly, wrapped in silence. Sometimes the strongest thing you can say is nothing at all, not out of spite, not from anger, but from clarity. When you no longer argue, no longer explain, no longer chase understanding from those committed to misunderstanding you, that is not giving up. That is drawing a line. That is choosing your peace over their permission. The silence where boundaries are built is not empty. It is deliberate. It's the kind of silence that comes when you've said it all before, when your voice has been stretched too thin, trying to hold up other people's comfort. It's the silence that says, "This time I choose me." Not in a way that denies love to others, but in a way that stops denying it to yourself. There comes a moment when you realize that every time you say yes out of guilt, every time you let someone cross a line out of habit, you are training yourself to live smaller than you were made to be. And it is in that quiet realization that something powerful begins to grow. Not resentment, but resolve. Not distance, but direction. You don't need to explain your boundaries to everyone. You don't owe your silence an apology. Sometimes the most respectful thing you can do for them and for yourself is to step back, to pause, to become unavailable to what drains you. And in that sacred withdrawal, you begin the work of rebuilding the walls that protect the garden of your spirit. People may not like your silence. They may feel entitled to your energy, your time, your attention, especially when they've gotten used to your constant yes. But your healing does not require their agreement. Your peace does not depend on their comfort. The silence that builds boundaries is not cruel, it is careful. It is the kind of careful that says, "I see what I need now, and I will no longer ignore it." In the quiet, you learn to separate what is yours to carry from what you were never meant to hold. You begin to sort through all the inherited obligations, the emotional debts, the roles you were given but never agreed to. And with each realization, a line is drawn, not a wall to keep love out, but a door to let self-respect in. The beauty of boundaries is not in what they push away, it's in what they allow to flourish. When you stop overextending, you start to restore. When you stop explaining yourself to those who are committed to misunderstanding you, you start to hear yourself again. In that silence, your own voice returns, not loud, but sure. It tells you what you need. It tells you where your yes is sacred, and it tells you that no is a full sentence. Some will mistake your boundaries for distance. Let them. Some will accuse you of being cold, unkind, withdrawn. Let them. Your boundary is not about them, it's about your becoming. You are not withdrawing in bitterness. You are returning to your center. And from that place, everything that is truly meant for you can find you without crossing your peace to reach you. The silence where boundaries are formed is a teacher. It shows you who respects your limits and who only loved your access. It reveals which connections were rooted in reciprocity and which were built on convenience. And as painful as those revelations may be, they are necessary, because you cannot grow in soil that is constantly being walked on. You cannot bloom in a space where your needs are seen as inconveniences. In silence, you learn to choose differently. You learn that love that costs you yourself is not love. It's self-abandonment. You learn that protecting your energy is not selfish. It's sacred. And you learn that no one can honor your boundaries if you are too afraid to build them. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's just not answering the call, not opening the door, not replying to the message, not showing up where you were once expected to bleed quietly. You begin to live less from obligation and more from alignment. And as your silence deepens, so does your sense of self. You no longer need to scream your worth. You simply become someone who acts like they are worthy, and the world responds accordingly. The peace that follows this kind of silence is not the absence of noise, it is the presence of self. It is knowing that you are allowed to protect what is sacred within you. It is understanding that your time, your space, your energy, your joy, none of it is disposable. And the people who truly love you will never make you feel like it is. There comes a time when the crowd walks away, when the noise fades, the spotlight dims, and the applause stops echoing through your memory. At first, that silence feels like abandonment, like loss, like something in you has become invisible to the world. But over time, if you stay still long enough, if you resist the urge to beg the world to look again, something softer begins to happen. You begin to see yourself clearly, maybe for the first time, because transformation does not need an audience. It needs honesty. It needs space to break down the pieces of you that were shaped by approval, performance, or fear, and to uncover the parts that were always true, always sacred, just waiting beneath the surface. Real change doesn't come while you're trying to keep up appearances. It doesn't bloom under the pressure of perfection. It starts when you are no longer trying to impress and you begin the real work of becoming. You will know you are on the edge of transformation when everything familiar stops working, when the way you used to cope no longer soothes you, when the roles you played begin to feel too tight, too small, too scripted. That discomfort is not punishment. It is a signal. It's life calling you inward, calling you deeper. And it's no coincidence that it happens when no one is watching. The soul does not heal in public. It needs the safety of solitude. It needs to not be seen so that it can see itself. There's a kind of shedding that happens in the quiet. You start letting go of what you clung to for identity, the titles, the roles, the reactions you once depended on to feel valid. At first, it feels like loss, but then it starts to feel like freedom, because when you are no longer performing for the crowd, you realize you are free to be whole, not perfect, not polished, whole. It's easy to mistake attention for connection, but when the spotlight moves on, you are left to reckon with what's real. That is when the real work begins. You learn to speak kindly to yourself without needing someone else to affirm it. You learn to soothe your fears without posting them for sympathy. You learn to grow quietly without narrating your pain or turning your healing into a performance. The outside world may call this disappearance, but it is more like emergence. You are not vanishing. You are returning. You are reintroducing yourself to the parts of your spirit that were buried under noise, expectation, and fear. And in that reintroduction, you realize something beautiful. Your transformation was never meant to entertain. It was meant to liberate. The world teaches us to show up and shine. But what it doesn't teach us is how to sit in the shadows and rebuild. It doesn't celebrate the nights you cry yourself open. It doesn't reward the mornings you choose to forgive when no one knows the war you're fighting. But those are the sacred places, the unseen victories, the moments that shape who you are in ways no stage ever could. When no one is watching, you begin to ask different questions. Not how do I look, but how do I feel? Not will they like me, but do I even like myself? That shift changes everything. You stop chasing applause and start chasing peace. You stop striving for relevance and start searching for alignment. You begin to build a life that feels good on the inside, even if no one ever claps for it. And as you grow in that solitude, you begin to carry something different, an energy that cannot be faked, a presence that doesn't beg to be seen. It just is, because when you've been to the bottom of your soul and made peace with what you found there, you no longer need the world's permission to be whole. You are not becoming for them, you are becoming for you. The irony is, once you no longer need to be seen, you are seen more clearly. Once you stop asking for validation, people begin to feel your groundedness. They sense your inner anchor. You don't speak louder, but your words carry more weight. You don't show off your healing, but it radiates through everything you do. And that's the quiet reward of true transformation. It shows even when you're not trying. Let the world forget you for a while. Let it turn its attention elsewhere. Use that space not to despair, but to deepen, to redefine, to rebuild, because the most powerful version of you won't need the world to look first. You'll arrive so full, so rooted, so real, that your presence will speak louder than any spotlight ever could. Let them wonder where you went. Let them whisper why you stopped explaining. Let them watch as you rise, not with noise, not with spectacle, but with a stillness so deep it commands the room. You do not need to be seen to be growing. You do not need to be loud to be heard. Focus on yourself, stay silent, and then just watch how life changes.